Christmas Eve, the night families come together. The night I discovered my family had been planning to destroy me for 15 years. My name is Amanda, and this is the story of how I gave my family the most unforgettable Christmas gift they never saw coming. By the end of this story, you'll know exactly how to protect yourself from the kind of family betrayal that 67% of American families hide behind closed doors. Because what happened to me could happen to anyone who trusts the wrong people, even when those people share your blood. It started like every other Christmas Eve. I was in my childhood bedroom, wrapping presents for the family that I thought loved me. Red ribbon, gold paper, perfect little bows. Each gift carefully chosen, each one representing another year of putting everyone else first. But as I sat there on that worn carpet, something felt different. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. See, for 15 years, I'd been the perfect daughter. The one who dropped everything when Dad had his heart attack. The one who moved back home to help Mom through her difficult phase. The one who paid for my brother Michael's college tuition when he got into a little financial trouble. The one who covered my sister Jessica's wedding costs because family helps family. Over $200,000. That's what I'd given to this family. Not loaned, given. Money I'd saved from working 60-hour weeks at a job I hated, just so I could be the daughter they needed me to be. I told myself it was love. I told myself it was what good daughters do. I was 35 years old, single, living in a tiny apartment. Because every time I tried to save for something better, someone in my family needed help. Amanda's so successful, they'd say. Amanda can handle it. And I always did. I always handled it. But that Christmas Eve, as I wrapped Michael's expensive watch and Jessica's designer purse, I realized something that made my hands shake. I couldn't remember the last time anyone in my family had asked how I was doing. Really asked. Not the polite, how's work kind of asking, but the kind where they actually wanted to hear the answer. I couldn't remember the last time anyone had given me something that cost them anything. Oh, they gave me gifts. Generic gift cards, last-minute purchases. Things that screamed, we forgot about you until yesterday. Meanwhile, I spent weeks researching the perfect presents for each of them. Using money I didn't have to spare. The house was quiet. Mom and Dad were at the neighbor's annual Christmas Eve party, the one I wasn't invited to because you're always so busy with work, dear. Michael was out with his friends, probably spending the money I'd given him for rent, on drinks and expensive dinners. Jessica was at her in-laws, the family that actually wanted her around for the holidays. And there I was, alone, wrapping presents for people who couldn't be bothered to spend Christmas Eve with me. That's when I heard it. Dad's office door creaking open. He'd left it unlocked, which was weird, because he usually kept it locked tight. Something told me to go look. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was 15 years of suppressed suspicion finally breaking through. I walked down that familiar hallway, past the family photos where my smile got smaller and smaller over the years, past the achievement awards that somehow only belonged to Michael and Jessica, even though I was the one with the master's degree and the successful career. Dad's office smelled like old paper and disappointment. His desk was covered with documents, and there, right on top, was a folder labeled Will and Testament, updated December 2024. My heart started pounding. I shouldn't look. Good daughters don't snoop through their father's private papers. But something stronger than propriety took over. Something that had been building for 15 years finally demanded answers. I opened that folder, and my entire world shattered at 8:47 p.m. on Christmas Eve. The will was 43 pages long, 43 pages detailing how my parents planned to distribute their assets after death. The house I'd helped them keep with my mortgage payments, the savings account I'd helped them build with my contributions, the investment portfolio I'd helped them understand and grow. Michael, everything, the house, the investments, the savings, even Mom's jewelry collection. Total value, approximately $1.2 million. Jessica. All family heirlooms, photo collections, and personal memorabilia. Plus a $50,000 cash gift for being such a loving daughter. Amanda, nothing, not a single mention, not even a family photo or a piece of jewelry. 43 pages, and I didn't exist. But wait, there was more. Stapled to the back was a handwritten note in my mother's careful script. Amanda has always been financially successful and independent. She doesn't need our help like the other children do. We trust she'll understand this is the right decision for the family. The right decision for the family. The family I'd sacrificed everything for. The family I'd prioritized over my own future, my own happiness, my own life. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the papers. 15 years of believing I was the good daughter, the helpful one, the family rock. 15 years of telling myself that my sacrifices meant something, that my family appreciated me, that I was building something meaningful with all my giving. I was building something, all right. I was building their wealth, while they systematically wrote me out of their lives. But here's the thing about shock. It doesn't last forever. And when it wore off, it was replaced by something much more dangerous. Clarity. I took photos of every page with my phone. Every single detail of how they'd divided up what I'd helped them build. Then I put everything back exactly as I'd found it and walked back to my childhood bedroom like nothing had happened. But everything had happened. In that moment, I stopped being their victim and started being something else entirely. Someone they never expected me to become. See, they'd made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated the daughter they'd raised to be strategic, methodical, and incredibly good at planning. Those weren't just personality traits, they were weapons they'd taught me to use. And I was about to use them. I spent the rest of Christmas Eve doing research. Not the kind of research they'd expect from their successful daughter, but the kind that would change everything. Because if my family wanted to play games with people's lives, then we were going to play by my rules now. First, I started with what I already knew. Dad's business trips that Mom always seemed anxious about. The separate bank statements he kept locked in his filing cabinet. The phone calls he took in private, always stepping outside or going to another room. Then I moved on to Mom. Her shopping trips that lasted all day, but somehow never resulted in any purchases coming home. The credit card bills she hid from Dad. The way she always needed emergency money, but could never explain what the emergency was. Michael, my golden child brother, who could do no wrong. The one whose apartment I'd never actually visited, even though I'd been helping with rent for 3 years. The one who always had a different story about his job, his income, his plans. Jessica, Sweet Jessica, with her perfect marriage and her perfect life. The sister who always needed help with bills, but somehow always had money for expensive vacations, that she posted all over social media. It took me exactly 4 hours to crack open their entire web of lies. Dad wasn't just having an affair. He'd been supporting his mistress and their 10-year-old son for over a decade. A son I didn't even know existed. A son who was probably going to be in that will revision they hadn't shown me yet. Mom wasn't shopping on those mysterious trips. She was gambling. Casino records don't lie, and when you know where to look, they're surprisingly easy to find. She'd blown through nearly $50,000 in the past 2 years alone. Michael didn't have an apartment. He'd been living with his girlfriend's parents for free, while telling us he was struggling with rent. The money I'd been sending him, pure profit. Money he'd been using to fund a lifestyle that would make most trust fund kids jealous. Jessica's marriage wasn't perfect. It was fake. A green card arrangement that she'd been hiding from the family while playing the role of the happy wife. Her husband was gay, and they were both using the arrangement to get what they needed while lying to everyone around them. But the most beautiful discovery came at 3 a.m. when I hacked into the family group chat that I wasn't part of. Yes, you heard that right. My own family had a group chat that specifically excluded me. The messages went back years of them discussing how to get more money out of me. Years of them laughing about how gullible I was. Years of them planning exactly how to manipulate my emotions to get what they needed. Amanda's so easy to guilt trip, Jessica had written just 2 months ago. Just mention how much we love having her around, and she'll pay for anything. The inheritance thing is perfect, Michael had replied. She'll never think to ask about the will. She trusts us completely. Sometimes I feel bad, Mom had written, but then I remember how much money she makes. She can afford it. Don't feel bad, Dad had responded. She chose this life. She chose to be the family bank. They had chosen for me to be the family bank. They had systematically, deliberately, strategically turned me into their personal ATM while planning to cut me out of everything that mattered. But they'd forgotten something important about banks. When you try to rob them, they have security systems. And I was about to become their security system's worst nightmare. Christmas morning dawned gray and cold, which felt appropriate for what I was about to do. I'd been awake all night, but I wasn't tired. I was energized in a way I hadn't felt in years. 15 years of being tired, being used, being taken for granted. All of that was about to end. I had a plan, not a revenge plan, because revenge implies emotion. And I was way past emotion now. This was justice, strategic, calculated, perfectly timed justice. I drove to the local 24-hour print shop and made my preparations. Special gift boxes, professional printing, everything needed to make this Christmas morning unforgettable. The kind of unforgettable that would echo through family gatherings for generations. By 9 a.m., I was back at the family house with my arms full of beautifully wrapped presents. Mom answered the door in her Christmas sweater, the one I'd bought her last year. "Amanda, you're early. We weren't expecting you until noon." "I know," I said, smiling the smile I'd perfected over 15 years of keeping peace. I just couldn't wait to give everyone their gifts. The extended family was already there. Aunt Carol and Uncle Jim, Cousin Sarah with her kids, Grandma Williams in her wheelchair by the fireplace. The whole loving family tableau, minus the actual love. Perfect. The bigger the audience, the better. Dad was in his recliner, wearing the watch I'd bought him 3 Christmases ago. Michael was on the couch playing with some expensive gadget that I'd probably funded indirectly. Jessica was taking selfies by the Christmas tree, making sure to get the perfect angle. Before we do the regular gift exchange, I announced, I have some special presents this year, really special ones that I've been working on for months. Oh, Amanda, Mom said, already reaching for her guilt trip voice. You didn't have to go to any trouble. No trouble at all, I said, setting my special boxes under the tree. In fact, these gifts basically made themselves once I knew what everyone really wanted. I started with Dad. The box was heavy, professionally wrapped, with a ribbon that cost more than most people's Christmas budget. This one's for you, Dad, for the man who taught me that family comes first. He opened it slowly, savoring the attention. Inside was a beautiful silver frame with a photo that made him go completely white. It was him and her and the 10-year-old boy who had his eyes. Merry Christmas, I said sweetly. I thought you'd like a family photo that actually shows your whole family. The room went silent. Mom's face went through about 17 different emotions in 3 seconds. Aunt Carol leaned forward to get a better look. Grandma Williams asked someone to bring her glasses. Amanda, Dad started, but I was already moving. Oh, and Mom, this one's for you. Another heavy box, another perfect bow. For the woman who taught me that it's important to have hobbies. Mom's hands were shaking as she unwrapped it. Inside was a detailed accounting of every casino visit, every bet, every loss. Printed on official letterhead from the casinos themselves, complete with her membership card and VIP status information. $50,000, I said cheerfully. That's an expensive hobby. I included some information about gambling addiction support groups. You know, just in case you need them. Now Dad was looking at Mom like he'd never seen her before. The room was so quiet you could hear the Christmas tree lights humming. Michael, I continued, my voice still bright and cheerful. This one's special just for you. His box contained copies of every false document he'd submitted for unemployment benefits while living rent-free and taking my money. Every fake pay stub, every fraudulent claim, every lie he'd told to get government assistance he didn't qualify for. The IRS information packet is included, I said helpfully, along with the contact information for reporting fraud. I thought they might be interested in your creative accounting skills. Michael had gone gray, actually gray like old dishwater, and Jessica, sweet Jessica, the family's little princess. Her box was smaller, but somehow more devastating. Immigration documents. Photos of her husband with his actual boyfriend. Evidence of the green card marriage that could land both of them in federal prison. I wasn't sure if you'd prefer the INS contact information or the FBI tip line, I said, so I included both. The room was dead silent except for the sound of Cousin Sarah's kids playing in the other room, oblivious to the fact that their entire family was imploding in real time. Now, I said, standing in the middle of the Christmas carnage I'd created, I have one more gift. This one's for all of you. I pulled out the final envelope, the one that contained copies of the will, the family group chat messages, and a detailed accounting of every dollar I'd given them over the past 15 years. This is my gift to myself, I announced, the gift of truth. See, last night I learned something interesting. I learned that families are supposed to love each other. They're supposed to support each other. They're supposed to include each other in their lives and their futures. I looked around the room, making eye contact with each person who'd betrayed me. What families aren't supposed to do is systematically lie to each other, steal from each other, and exclude each other from group chats while planning to write them out of wills. I opened the envelope and started reading selected quotes from their group chat. Every cruel joke, every manipulation strategy, every plan to use me. "Amanda's so easy to guilt trip," I read in Jessica's voice. "Just mention how much we love having her around, and she'll pay for anything." Jessica started crying. Not the pretty kind of crying you see in movies, but the ugly, desperate kind that comes from being caught. "She chose to be the family bank," I continued, looking directly at Dad. "That's what you said about me, your daughter, the one who sacrificed her own future to help build yours." "Amanda, let me explain," Dad started. "Oh, you don't need to explain," I interrupted. "It's all very clear. You used me, all of you. For 15 years, you turned me into your personal ATM while planning to cut me out of everything that mattered." I looked around the room one more time, at the faces of people I'd loved unconditionally for my entire life. So here's my final Christmas gift to myself and to all of you. I'm done. I'm done being your bank. I'm done being your emotional punching bag. I'm done pretending that being family means anything when family treats each other like this. I headed toward the door, then turned back for one final moment. Oh, and just so everyone knows, I've documented everything. Every conversation, every transaction, every lie. If any of you try to retaliate against me or spread lies about what happened here today, those documents go straight to the relevant authorities. Aunt Carol was the first to speak. "Amanda, wait, I had no idea." "I know you didn't," I said. "This isn't about you. This is about people who spent 15 years teaching me that love has conditions, that family comes with price tags, and that trust is just another word for gullibility." I looked at Mom one more time. "You were right about one thing. I am financially successful and independent. I don't need your help. I never did. What I needed was your love, your respect, and your honesty. But since you can't afford those things, we're done here." And I walked out. On Christmas morning, I walked out of that house and never looked back. But the story doesn't end there. Oh no. The real story was just beginning, because what happened next taught me something that every person watching this needs to understand. When you stop accepting unacceptable behavior, when you stop funding your own abuse, when you stop pretending that blood relations excuse betrayal, that's when your real life begins. The fallout from Christmas morning was immediate and spectacular. Within hours, my phone was exploding with calls, texts, and voicemails. Not apologies, demands. Demands that I come back, demands that I stop being dramatic, demands that I think about the family, the same family that had spent years thinking about how to exploit me. Mom called 17 times in the first 2 hours. When I didn't answer, she started leaving voicemails that went from pleading to angry to threatening. "You've destroyed Christmas," she sobbed in one message. "You've destroyed our family," she screamed in another. Dad tried a different approach. He sent text messages about misunderstandings and overreactions. He wanted to sit down and talk like adults, which was interesting since adults don't usually steal from their children while lying to their faces. Michael went straight to social media, posting about family drama and forgiveness, painting himself as the victim of his sister's mental breakdown. That backfired spectacularly when cousin Sarah commented with some very pointed questions about his unemployment claims. But Jessica surprised me. She called once, cried for about 30 seconds, then said something I never expected. "I'm sorry, you didn't deserve this, none of it." It was the first genuine apology I'd heard from anyone in my family in 15 years. The extended family reactions were mixed but revealing. Aunt Carol called to tell me she'd suspected something was wrong for years but hadn't wanted to interfere. Uncle Jim offered to help me with legal matters if I needed it. Grandma Williams, bless her heart, called to say she was proud of me for standing up for myself. But the most telling reactions came from the family friends and neighbors who'd witnessed the Christmas morning massacre. Within days, I started hearing from people who'd known my family for decades. "I always wondered why you looked so tired at family gatherings," one neighbor told me. "Now I know." "Your mother borrowed money from us 3 years ago," another family friend revealed. "She said it was for your father's medical bills, but we saw him at the casino the next week." "We stopped inviting your family to parties because they always seemed to be scheming about something," someone else admitted. It turned out that my family's manipulation wasn't a secret. I was just the last person to figure it out. The professional consequences for them started rolling in within a week. Dad's affair became an HR issue when his mistress decided she was tired of being a secret and showed up at his workplace demanding answers. Mom's gambling debts triggered a financial investigation that revealed she'd been hiding assets from Dad. Michael's unemployment fraud triggered an actual federal investigation. Jessica's immigration situation became a legal nightmare that involved lawyers and deportation threats. Meanwhile, something amazing was happening to me. For the first time in 15 years, I wasn't fielding daily crisis calls. I wasn't transferring money to solve other people's emergencies. I wasn't managing everyone else's emotions while ignoring my own. I was free. The first thing I did was move, not just to a new apartment, but to a new city. I took a job promotion I'd been putting off for years because it would have meant moving away from family. Suddenly, moving away from family sounded like the best idea I'd ever had. The second thing I did was therapy, real therapy, with a professional who specialized in family manipulation and emotional abuse. That's where I learned terms like financial abuse and emotional parentification and trauma bonding. That's where I learned that what happened to me had a name and that it wasn't my fault. The third thing I did was start saving money, real money for myself, for my future, for things I wanted instead of things other people needed. Within 6 months, I'd saved more money than I had in the previous 5 years combined. But the most important thing I did was start building a chosen family. People who loved me for who I was, not what I could provide. People who celebrated my successes instead of resenting them. People who asked how I was doing and actually wanted to hear the answer. 3 months after Christmas, I got a call from a lawyer. Dad had had another heart attack, and Mom wanted me to know that he was in the hospital. She wanted me to come be with family during this difficult time. I listened to the whole message, then deleted it. 6 months later, I got another call. This time it was Jessica, calling to tell me that Mom and Dad were getting divorced. The gambling debts, the affair, the lies, it had all come crashing down. She wanted to know if I would help mediate because family needs to stick together. I listened to that message too, then blocked her number. A year later, Michael was convicted of unemployment fraud and sentenced to 2 years probation and full restitution. Mom lost the house to pay off gambling debts. Dad moved in with his mistress and their son. Jessica's marriage was investigated by immigration authorities and ultimately dissolved. Did I feel guilty? Did I feel responsible for the destruction of my family? Not for a single second. Because here's what I learned that Christmas morning, and what everyone watching this needs to understand. You cannot destroy something that was never real. You cannot ruin relationships that were built on lies. You cannot betray people who were already betraying you. My family destroyed themselves. They destroyed themselves with their lies, their greed, their manipulation, and their complete disregard for the person who loved them most. I just stopped enabling the destruction. The woman who walked out of that house on Christmas morning was not the same woman who'd walked in. The woman who walked out was stronger, smarter, and finally free. And if you're watching this because someone in your family is treating you like an ATM, if you're watching this because you recognize the patterns of manipulation and financial abuse, if you're watching this because you're tired of being the family scapegoat, while everyone else gets to be the golden child, then I want you to know something. You deserve better. You deserve love that doesn't come with conditions. You deserve respect that doesn't require payment. You deserve family that sees you as a person, not a resource. And if your current family can't give you those things, then maybe it's time to start building a new one that actually knows what family means. And if you think that's where the story ends, you're wrong. Because the most important part isn't the revenge or the justice or even the family falling apart. The most important part is what comes next. The part where you rebuild your life without toxic people in it. The part where you learn what healthy relationships actually look like. But first, let me tell you about the war they tried to wage against me after I walked out that door. Because people like my family don't just accept defeat. They don't just quietly fade away when their ATM machine suddenly develops boundaries. No, they escalate. They deploy every manipulation tactic they have ever learned, and they aim them all at you at once. The phone calls started within hours, but when those didn't work, they moved to phase 2, the flying monkeys. That's what therapists call the people who do the abuser's dirty work for them. The well-meaning relatives, the family friends, the people who don't know the whole story, but feel obligated to help fix things. Aunt Margaret called first. Amanda, honey, I know there's been some kind of misunderstanding, but family is family. Your mother is just devastated. Can't you just forgive and forget? Then came the neighbors. Your poor parents are so confused. They just want their daughter back. Surely whatever happened can't be that bad. The family priest even got involved. I've known your family for 20 years. They're good people who made some mistakes. The Christian thing to do is forgive. Each call followed the same script. Minimize what happened. Make me the villain for overreacting. Guilt me into coming back because family forgives. But here's what I learned in therapy. Flying monkeys aren't evil people. They're just uninformed people being used by evil people. And the best way to handle them is with information. So I started telling the truth. Not vindictively, not angrily, but calmly and factually. When Aunt Margaret called about misunderstandings, I emailed her copies of the group chat messages. When the neighbors expressed concern for my poor parents, I shared the documentation of 15 years of financial manipulation. The results were immediate and satisfying. Aunt Margaret never called again, but she did start avoiding my mother at church. The neighbors stopped asking questions, but they also stopped inviting my parents to neighborhood gatherings. The priest recommended family counseling, then mysteriously became unavailable when my mother tried to schedule appointments. But my family's most desperate move came 3 months after Christmas. They hired a lawyer. Apparently, they decided that if emotional manipulation wouldn't work, legal manipulation might. They claimed I'd stolen family documents when I photographed the will. They accused me of harassment for exposing their lies. They even tried to argue that I'd somehow coerced them into making those group chat messages. Their lawyer lasted exactly 1 meeting with my lawyer before recommending they drop the case immediately. You see, when you document everything, when you keep records, when you have evidence instead of just accusations, the legal system becomes your friend. And when the opposing side has a history of fraud, infidelity, and financial crimes, threatening legal action becomes a very stupid strategy. My lawyer's response was beautiful in its simplicity. We countersued for financial abuse, filed complaints with every relevant agency about their various crimes, and threatened to make their legal filing public record. They withdrew their lawsuit within a week, but the most telling moment came 4 months after Christmas, when Jessica called me from a blocked number. "Amanda," she said, and I could hear the desperation in her voice. "I need help. My immigration case is falling apart. Mom won't help because she's broke. Dad won't help because he's mad about the divorce. And Michael can't help because he's dealing with the federal investigators." She paused, and I could hear her crying. "I know I have no right to ask, but you're the only one in the family who has any money left. Could you loan me $50,000 for lawyer fees? I'll pay you back, I promise." $50,000, more than she'd ever contributed to the family, more than she'd ever given me for anything, more than she'd ever spent on anyone but herself. "Jessica," I said calmly, "do you remember what you wrote in the family group chat about me being easy to guilt trip?" Silence. "Do you remember laughing about how gullible I was, how easy it was to manipulate me?" More silence. "Well, congratulations. You helped cure me of that problem permanently." I hung up, blocked her number, and never spoke to any of them again. Because that's the thing about boundaries. They're not suggestions. They're not starting points for negotiation. They're walls that protect your peace, your sanity, and your future. And walls only work if you don't keep opening doors in them every time someone knocks. But here's what nobody tells you about going no contact with toxic family members. It's not just about keeping them out of your life. It's about learning how to live without the dysfunction you've been programmed to accept as normal. For 35 years, I'd been trained to believe that love came with conditions. That family meant sacrifice. That my worth was measured by how much I could give and how little I could ask for in return. Unlearning those beliefs was harder than any revenge I'd ever planned. The first challenge was the guilt. Even after everything they'd done, even with all the evidence of their manipulation, I still felt guilty for abandoning them. That's what trauma bonding does to you. It makes you feel responsible for your abuser's feelings even when they've never cared about yours. The second challenge was the loneliness. When you cut contact with toxic family members, You don't just lose them. You lose the extended family gatherings, the holiday traditions, the shared memories. You lose the illusion of belonging somewhere, even if that belonging was conditional and harmful. The third challenge was the fear. What if I was wrong? What if I was the problem? What if I just destroyed my only family over a misunderstanding? But therapy taught me something crucial about those fears. They weren't based on reality. They were based on the programming my family had installed in me over decades of manipulation. My therapist had me do an exercise. She asked me to write down every single thing my family had ever done that showed genuine love and care for me. Not obligation, not manipulation, not using me for something they needed, but actual unconditional love. I sat with that paper for 2 hours. The list had 3 items on it. 3 genuine moments of love in 35 years of family relationships. Then she asked me to write down every manipulative, hurtful, or exploitative thing they'd ever done. I filled 6 pages and ran out of space. "Amanda," she said gently, "you didn't destroy your family. You escaped from people who were systematically destroying you." That was the moment I stopped feeling guilty and started feeling grateful. Grateful that I'd found the courage to leave. Grateful that I'd documented everything so I couldn't gaslight myself into forgetting. Grateful that I'd finally prioritized my own well-being over other people's comfort. But the most profound change wasn't emotional, it was practical. For the first time in my adult life, I had control over my own money. Do you know what it's like to have a savings account that actually grows instead of being constantly drained by other people's emergencies? Do you know what it's like to buy something nice for yourself without calculating whether you can afford it after covering everyone else's needs? Within 6 months of going no contact, I'd saved more money than I had in the previous 5 years combined. Not because I was making more, but because I wasn't hemorrhaging thousands of dollars every month to fund other people's irresponsibility. I bought a house, not a big house, not an expensive house, but a house that was mine. A house where no one could call me at 2 a.m. demanding money. A house where no one could guilt trip me into paying their bills. A house where the only person's problems I had to solve were my own. I decorated it exactly how I wanted. No compromises, no family heirloom furniture that I hated, no photos of people who'd betrayed me. Just my space, my choices, my peace. But the biggest change was in my relationships with other people. When you stop accepting unacceptable behavior from family, you automatically stop accepting it from everyone else too. I started noticing patterns I'd been blind to before. The friend who only called when she needed something. The coworker who dumped all his problems on me but was never available when I needed support. The romantic interests who saw my kindness as weakness and my boundaries as suggestions. One by one, I started setting boundaries with everyone in my life. Not walls, but healthy limits that protected my energy and my peace. Some people respected those boundaries and became closer friends. Others got angry and revealed their true motivations for staying in my life. The friendship purge was swift and decisive. When you stop being willing to be used, you discover how many people were only interested in using you. But something beautiful happened in all that empty space where toxic relationships used to live. Healthy relationships started growing. I met Sarah at a volunteer organization I joined. She was funny, kind, and genuinely interested in getting to know me as a person. When I told her about my family situation, she didn't try to convince me to reconcile or minimize what had happened. She said, "That sounds really hard. I'm glad you got away from that." I met Marcus at a hiking group. He was divorced, had his own kids, and understood complicated family dynamics. When I explained why I didn't talk to my family anymore, he nodded and said, "Some people are related to you by blood but not by love." I met Rachel at work. She was ambitious, successful, and had also cut contact with abusive parents. We bonded over the unique challenges of building a life without family support, but also over the freedom that came with that independence. These weren't relationships based on what I could provide or how I could help solve their problems. These were relationships based on mutual respect, shared interests, and genuine affection. This was what healthy love looked like. This was what I'd been missing my entire life. A year after Christmas, I got a promotion at work, a big one with a significant salary increase and relocation to a major city. The old Amanda would have turned it down because family needed her nearby. The new Amanda took it without hesitation. I moved to Denver, bought a beautiful apartment with mountain views, and started a life that was entirely my own. 2 years after Christmas, I met David. He was a lawyer, divorced with shared custody of 2 kids, and the first man I'd ever dated who didn't see my success as threatening or my boundaries as negotiable. On our 3rd date, I told him about my family situation. I was prepared for the usual responses: advice about forgiveness, suggestions about reconciliation, judgment about my harsh decisions. Instead, he listened to the whole story, then said, "It sounds like you made the only healthy choice available to you. I'm sorry you had to go through that, but I'm impressed by how you handled it." He didn't try to fix me or change me or convince me to give my family another chance. He accepted me exactly as I was, a woman who'd learned to value herself enough to walk away from people who didn't. We've been together for 3 years now. We're talking about marriage, about building a family together, about creating the kind of loving, honest, supportive relationship that I never knew was possible. His kids, Emma and Jake, call me their bonus mom. They don't know the details of why I don't have family around, but they know I love them fiercely and that I'll always be honest with them. This is what family was supposed to feel like. This is what I'd been missing all those years. But the most important relationship I developed wasn't with any of these wonderful people. It was with myself. 3 years after Christmas, I started doing something I'd never done before. I started celebrating my own birthday, not waiting for other people to remember or plan something, but actively celebrating my own existence. I threw myself a party. I invited all my chosen family: Sarah, Marcus, Rachel, David, Emma, Jake, and a dozen other people who'd become important to me. We had dinner, we had cake, we had toasts about living authentically and choosing love over obligation. It was the best birthday I'd ever had. 4 years after Christmas, I did something even more radical. I started a blog about family estrangement and financial abuse. I shared my story, not for revenge, but to help other people recognize the signs of manipulation and find the courage to set boundaries. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of people reached out to share their own stories. Stories of family members who used guilt, obligation, and fake crises to manipulate money out of their relatives. Stories of children who'd been turned into ATMs by their own parents. Stories of siblings who'd been systematically excluded while being expected to fund everyone else's lives. I wasn't alone. My experience wasn't unique. There was an entire community of people who'd been financially and emotionally abused by their families, and most of them felt guilty for wanting to protect themselves. I started a support group, then I started a nonprofit organization, then I started speaking at conferences about family financial abuse and the importance of boundaries, my story, my pain, my courage to walk away. It was helping other people find their own courage. 5 years after Christmas, I received an unexpected piece of mail, a wedding invitation. It was from Jessica. She was getting married again, this time to someone she actually loved instead of someone she was using for citizenship. The invitation was addressed to me and included a handwritten note. Amanda, I know I have no right to invite you, and I understand if you don't want to come, but I wanted you to know that I'm finally in a real relationship with someone who loves me for who I am, not what I can provide. I learned that from watching you. I learned that I deserved better by seeing you demand better. I'm sorry for everything our family put you through, and I'm grateful that you showed us all what self-respect looks like. I hope someday I can be as brave as you were. I didn't go to the wedding, but I sent a card with a simple message. Congratulations on choosing love over convenience. Wishing you a lifetime of honest, healthy relationships. Because that's the thing about healing. It's not about holding grudges or staying angry forever. It's about protecting your peace while hoping that the people who hurt you eventually learn to do better. 6 years after Christmas, I married David in a small ceremony surrounded by our chosen family. Emma walked me down the aisle because I'd helped raise her, and she wanted to give me away to Dad officially. Jake was the ring bearer and took his job very seriously. There were no blood relatives at my wedding, but there was more love in that room than I'd experienced in 35 years of family gatherings. During my vows, I said something that surprised even me. Thank you for showing me what love looks like when it doesn't come with conditions. Thank you for choosing me, not because you need something from me, but because you want to build something with me. 7 years after Christmas, David and I had a daughter, Lily. Beautiful, perfect, innocent Lily, who will never know what it's like to be treated as an ATM by people who claim to love her. When I held her for the first time, I made her a promise. I promised that she would grow up knowing her worth wasn't measured by what she could provide for other people. I promised that she would learn to set boundaries early and maintain them consistently. I promised that she would never have to choose between being loved and being used. Most importantly, I promised that she would see healthy relationships modeled for her every day, so she'd never accept dysfunction as normal. 8 years after Christmas, my mother died. I found out from an obituary that a former neighbor sent me. There was no funeral announcement, no family notification, no request for me to attend. I felt nothing, not grief, not relief, not regret. Just nothing. That evening, I sat in my garden with David, watching Lily play with bubbles in the fading sunlight, and I realized something profound. The woman who had given birth to me was gone, but I had never really had a mother anyway, not in any way that mattered. What I'd had was a woman who'd seen me as a resource to exploit, rather than a daughter to cherish. The real mothers in my life were still very much alive. Sarah, who listened to my fears about parenting and assured me I was doing great. Rachel, who showed up with dinner when Lily was sick and I was exhausted. My mother-in-law, who loved me unconditionally and never asked for anything in return. These were the women who'd taught me how to mother Lily. These were the relationships that had shown me what family really meant. 9 years after Christmas, I received a call from a lawyer I didn't know. My father had died, and apparently I was named in his will. "Miss Williams," the lawyer said, "your father left you a letter and a small inheritance. Would you like me to mail them to you?" The inheritance was $5,000. The letter was 2 pages of handwritten apology. He acknowledged what the family had done to me. He admitted to the manipulation, the lies, the systematic exploitation. He expressed regret for not standing up to my mother, for enabling the abuse, for prioritizing everyone else's comfort over my well-being. "I know this doesn't fix anything," he wrote. "I know an apology can't undo 15 years of using you, but I want you to know that I see now what we did to you, and I'm sorry. I hope you've found peace and happiness without us. I hope your life is everything ours prevented it from being." I read the letter twice, then put it in a file cabinet. Not because I wanted to treasure it, but because it was evidence that I'd been right all along. Validation that my decision to leave had been correct. I donated the money to my nonprofit organization. It seemed appropriate that his final contribution to my life would help other people escape the kind of family he'd helped create. 10 years after Christmas, I'm writing this story for all of you who are watching from inside your own toxic family situations. All of you who are being used, manipulated, and exploited by people who claim to love you. All of you who are wondering if you're overreacting, if you're being too sensitive, if family really is supposed to come with these kinds of conditions. You're not overreacting, you're not being too sensitive. And no, family is not supposed to treat you like an ATM while planning to cut you out of their will. You deserve better. You deserve love without conditions, support without price tags, and relationships that give as much as they take. You deserve a chosen family that sees your worth, celebrates your success, and supports your dreams. You deserve the kind of life I have now, a life filled with people who love me for who I am, not what I can provide. A life where my boundaries are respected, my feelings matter, and my future belongs to me. If you're ready to stop funding your own abuse, if you're ready to walk away from people who see you as a resource instead of a person, if you're ready to build the kind of family you actually deserve, then take that first step. Document everything, set boundaries, build your support system, and then, when you're ready, give yourself the greatest gift you'll ever receive. Give yourself permission to walk away from people who don't deserve you and toward people who do. Because on the other side of that decision is a life you can't even imagine yet. A life where you matter, where your needs count, where your love is valued instead of exploited. A life where Christmas morning brings joy instead of betrayal, where family means support instead of manipulation, and where you finally understand what you've always deserved but never received. That life is waiting for you. All you have to do is choose it.